Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Good Advice Podcast. The heart and soul of this podcast is to give you some good advice on how you can grow and scale your business. Now, whether you're a new business owner or you're a more seasoned business owner, those of us who've been in the game for a while, we know that there's no simple answer to running a successful business. In fact, what worked in one situation for one business may not work at all for another business. There's a lot of complexity in business, and I've just always been a fan of breaking things down into its simplest, most tangible form. That's what this show is all about. We're going to be talking today. We had an episode that came out a little bit earlier this month on content and why you need content. I want to continue that conversation, but I want to talk about why consistency is probably the most competitive advantage you can have in business. Let me say that again. Consistency is one of the most competitive advantages you can have in business. And I don't just mean like competitive in terms of why someone buys from you versus someone else, but when we talk about the game against ourselves, a lot of times when it comes to running a business, we're not actually talking about running a business that, you're beating out all these other competitors. That's pretty rarely the case. More often than not, businesses fail because they themselves weren't able to be run correctly. They weren't able to operate at the correct level to bring in cash, to bring in customers and what have you. So I want to talk about why consistency is so key for that. Before we dive in, though, we do have a word from one of the amazing businesses that sponsor the podcast. Of course, if you enjoy the podcast, you'd like to advertise your business on the show, you can always reach out, Blake at goodadvicecoaching.com. And a couple other quick plugs. We do have a Patreon. It's $5 a month. You can jump on patreon.com/goodadvice if you want to support the podcast. And then lastly, if you like the podcast, obviously tell your friends about it. Or if you get onto Good Advice here in Northwest Arkansas, you can drop us a review on our Google profile. But if you really don't like the podcast, maybe don't leave a review. So just kidding. All that to say, we'll dive in here in a second. Quick word from a sponsor. We'll be right back. See you soon. We talk to all sorts of business owners on the podcast, and one of the most common trends is business owners who just, for whatever reason, didn't fit in the corporate environment. A lot of entrepreneurs are seeking something. They're seeking an answer, and they're trying to figure out the simple question of, how do I fit in the world? And more importantly, is there a way to make a living that doesn't involve the traditional 9-to-5 job? One of the biggest pieces of advice that I give to entrepreneurs is, hey, you got to learn about who you are, what drives you, your motivation. That's why I want to tell you about this book, Your Turning Point, 33 Questions for Transformation. I love the impact I've been able to make through Good Advice and the Good Advice podcast, but that would not have been doable without taking an honest assessment of who I was today and who I wanted to be tomorrow. Go to the website, the33questions.com, and get yourself a copy of Your Turning Point by Stephen J. Blank, and let's continue on this road for transformation together. Again, the website is the33questions.com, where you can buy your book today. So I mentioned this in the intro. We're not really talking about competition today. However, I think consistency is a big piece of competition. Over the years of doing the podcast, man, I remember 5 years ago starting the podcast, and it felt like, and maybe this is a little bit of like rose-tinted glasses, but I feel like podcasting was kind of a rare thing. I remember thinking back, starting the show, and almost kind of feeling like a little bit of a quirky dork doing a podcast. Like, I remember telling people I was doing a podcast, and I think maybe also this is a little bit of like, people who know you will never fully appreciate you like a stranger will. This isn't like some like grand concept. It's the bottom line is that people who have known you your whole life, they will always typically underestimate you on average. I mean, we all have people that are in our corner that, they are raving fans of yours. But people who know us and they know the yuckiness of us, and our flaws and all these different things. It's honestly why I love my wife so much, is because she knows me through and through, and yet she's my biggest fan. Why? I don't know. But, that's why having people like that is so important. But point being, people who've known you for a long time, they just aren't typically as admiring of your work as the stranger on the internet will. So telling people I was doing a podcast, I remember, over the years, I got so many jokes and comments, and nothing that like really hurt my feelings or anything, but just, kind of just like underestimating comments of like, oh yeah, doing that podcast thing, Mr. Podcaster. And, I'd be like, yeah, I guess I am. But flash forward to 5 years later, and a lot of people are doing podcasts now. A lot of mainstream people. You see a lot of actors who, I think of the women of The Office who have their podcast. You see a lot of different celebrities who do their own shows, and podcasting is a pretty cool thing. I'm glad it has blown up. Otherwise, I'd probably be in a pretty bad spot today. Point isn't to say like I figured it out. I didn't. I wasn't even smart enough to do it. Randy Wilburn, who he hosts the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast, he was really the one to be like, hey, you should do a podcast. And frankly, I had no customers and I had nothing to do with my time. So I thought, sure, why not? I'll do a podcast. But flash forward to today, and it's funny how many people do podcasts. And sometimes I get in these conversations where, and honestly, people in our area, for those of you listening, if you're not from Northwest Arkansas, I don't know what your business environment is. I hear a lot about how kind Northwest Arkansas is and how welcoming Northwest Arkansas is to other businesses. I think part of that is that it's a very transient place. People are moving in and out at such a high pace that there's sort of like this effect of like, it's not really truly anyone's home. So it'd be a bit territorial to be like, this is my place, right? Now, having said that, there are some people who they've been here for 20 plus years, right? But I hear a lot from business owners who are new to the area. In fact, I think about our Tuesday morning group, our growth group, people who say like, oh, wow, I'm new there. People are so nice here. People are so great here. And I love that. So no one ever says things like this overtly, but sometimes I get comments like, hey, I heard so-and-so's doing a podcast, and hey, or not even so much someone's doing a podcast, but, hey, I heard someone's basically saying, hey, I heard so-and-so is opening like a competing service with yours. And I never really give those much thought, honestly. I give it thought in the sense of I do a quick check on like, okay, what's this person offering that I'm not offering? And is there any credibility there to something I should invest my time into iterating and developing? But point being, more often than not, my philosophy is when a new business pops up or a competitor pops up, I'm usually like, man, I've been doing this for 5 years and I will probably outlast most people who get into this game. It's a lot like realtors. We got what, 30? We got 3,000 realtors in Northwest Arkansas. If you're a lifelong career realtor and a new realtor pops up and comes to your networking group or whatever, you're probably feeling pretty cozy. You're probably thinking like, hey, I'm probably going to outlast you. Now, honestly, I think this is even a better way to do it. What I typically try to do is give as much good advice as I can to those people, because honestly, I wish someone had with me. I remember being in that situation and just desperately wanting to do good. I just wanted to help people, but feeling not feeling like overtly like held at arm's length, but definitely feeling a bit on the out, I guess. So what I try to do is when someone's new to the game, when someone's new to a service that is something I offer, I try to honestly just give as much advice as I can. Because frankly, in my perspective, there is so much money in this area that there's no worry of running out of customers. And I feel like that's the right way to do it. But aside from that, I've learned that most people won't make it long-term with their business. Part of that is stuff outside their control. I think about people who started a restaurant right before COVID. It's a little out of your control. It's going to affect your long term, right? So part of it's out of your control. The other part of it is really what I want to talk about today, and it's the challenge I have for you today. I think being successful is so much less about genuine insight. It is so much less about a one-off occurrence. It's not about the one customer that you met, the one person you talked to. Now, these things happen, right? You do meet people who are, it's an amazing evolution in your professional career. People who see talent in you, or they see quality in you, and they want to know more, and it leads, one thing leads to another. But what I have found is that people are overly insistent about those one-off situations and replicating it than they are about being consistent in doing good work. Think about this for a second. I think kind of like the stereotypical example of this is going to the gym. You don't go to the gym one time and then be mad that you look in the mirror afterwards. And by the way, this is like such a bad example, because I've joked with people that I actively avoid the gym as much as I can. I do not like the gym. I don't like exercising. Honestly, I like good food, and I like a lot of it. It's now, will there come a time that I think about my kids and I'm like, okay, I should probably be maybe a little less Andes would be good. Probably. Is that in my current, short term, we're talking 5-year goal here? I don't think so, but maybe, I don't know. But how wild would it be for someone to go to a gym one time and be mad that they can't see the results that they want? I think that situation is so true across so many facets of our life, but most specifically, professional success. And think for a moment how many places this is true. So many people are consumed about going viral with their content rather than creating a consistent habit of posting content. I've had friends in the content game who they do 30 or 40 video takes for their content piece, and then it doesn't go anywhere. And all that time's wasted. And frankly, for me, I've had times where I've spent a lot of time on a piece of content and it literally nothing happened. And then I just threw something up and it got some real momentum. Just kind of how it goes, right? But not just talking about content. This is true in many places. You have people who which speaking of content, by the way, a lot of times these people will post content and then they're mad. They're mad at the platform. And I'm going to set that to a side for a second, because I want to come back to this, because something like this came up in our growth group meetup on Tuesday mornings. But not just with content. This is true in networking and sales. I did BNI for a couple of years. I liked it. I had a great experience with it. I had my first baby, and then COVID happened, and so I just never re-upped my membership. But I had a good experience with it. But I remember early on in BNI, this woman who was mad that she hadn't gotten any referrals, which if you don't know what BNI is, it's like a paid networking kind of thing. And so you give people referrals, you try to help, you're like the sales force for each other's businesses that are in that group. Well, this woman joined the group, and then she was mad that she hadn't been given any referrals yet. And it had been a month. It maybe been a couple months, I can't remember. But it was you just got here. You gotta play the game a little bit. Play the game makes it seem like you're jumping through hoops, and that's not what it is. But it's that isn't how this works. You don't show up and now suddenly you're getting covered up in referrals. It's just not how the game works. Another example. So I have this Tuesday morning growth group, and We meet over at Red Kite in Springdale. It's Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. I've heard many times over from people who attend that this is their favorite event they go to in a week. So if you're in Northwest Arkansas, you should check this event out. Tuesday mornings at 9 o'clock. So this past Tuesday, when we use this little side room, it seats about probably 12 comfortably. I think we had like 17 or 18 people there. So we were pulling in chairs and we were joking about, please, no one else come. No one else come to this meetup. We are totally out of space. So it's fun to like have people come to that group. And people who come to it, they probably have like a random thought of like, I mean, they've told me, I already mentioned this, like, hey, this is a fun group. I like this group. There might even be people who come to groups like that and they're like, wow, I want a group like this. In fact, over the years, there's been a lot of other mastermind style networking groups that have popped up, especially in the last couple of years. What's funny to me is that it's one thing for someone to come to an event like that and think, oh, I want to start something like this. I want to do something like this. This is fun. But what people don't see are, oh my gosh, all the weeks that I held that group and no one came. No one sees that. And I'm not talking like I held it one time and no one came. I'm talking like multiple weeks, several weeks. I think there was a span of like 3 weeks in a row where I held this meeting and no one came. Y'all want to talk about the highs and lows of entrepreneurship? Man, you really question what you're doing with yourself and doing with your time in those situations. You really question, what the heck am I doing with my life in those situations? Because you feel embarrassed. You feel bad. And honestly, the only thing worse than those meetings where no one came were the meetups where when one person came. And that was a lot of times too, where one person would come. I'm sitting at this table. It's like this big round table. I'm sitting at this table. I'm just, I'm such a dork. I'm sitting there smiling, like, desperate for someone, right? Well, so you're sitting there, somebody comes in, they look, you could just always tell. You can always tell they're there for the growth group because every person does the same thing. They walk in, they kind of look around the room. And in my case, being the only person at this table, they kind of look at you for a second. And there's like this instant thought of like, you seem like you might be the growth group guy, but there's no one here. So this can't be the growth group. And so typically what happens is that person like walks around a little bit and then they come back and they say, hey, is this the growth group? And, again, they're the only one there. So I'm like, and I'm not going to like, I don't like break down into tears, even if I wanted to, right? But, big smile. Yeah, you made it. Hey, you're here. You made it to the growth group. Come on, sit down. And I'm sure there were times where like the person would sit down and be like, yeah, so is it just me today? Or, and I'm sure there were times where I was like, yeah, sometimes there's more people here, sometimes there's two people here, but hey, we got one. Man, so many weeks like that. Because also what would be fun is, and it was never like weird. It was weird, right? You came to a networking event and no one was there. But it was never weird where I was like, hey, tell me everything about you. It was just coffee talk. It was like, hey, what's your business? Oh, that's cool. Here's what I do. It's small talk, just trying to make a genuine relationship with somebody. Well, it was always funny because the person within, and this happened so many times where the person would get up and they'd be like, hey, well, this is great. I'm definitely going to come back next week. And I've just learned that anytime someone like goes out of their way to say, I will definitely be there, I'm like, you're not coming back. I am never going to see you again. And I don't think I ever did. I don't think I ever saw those people again. Now, why did I put myself through that? Why did I put myself out there to do something like that? Well, for me, when I started my business, and if you come to the growth group, you're going to hear this every week. I started the growth group because, guys, I had no freaking clue what I was doing when I started Good Advice. But I was so desperate for this burning need to help people. Seriously, like to be able to help someone with their business is so deeply fulfilling to me. I love it. And I had just this energy about it. I want to do this. I want to make a difference. I feel like this is a gift that God's given me. Like and I've been a high school teacher before that. And I had worked in this consulting firm also. And I feel like I had a gift of, one, connecting with people, but two, teaching, honestly, is really when it comes down to it, like teaching and educating. And I also just love business and entrepreneurship. It's kind of funny how like the professional career path goes, because I was actually a marketing major in college, and my college advisor was like, you don't want to do that. You're not going to find a job if you do that. So I switched actually to biology to be pre-med, which I never ended up doing. And then I ended up going and being a teacher because I shadowed a doctor for a week, and between wanting to throw up and realizing I really didn't like medicine, I was like, I should probably do something different because I obviously don't really enjoy this. But it's funny how how I ended up eventually was kind of back where I was first thinking about, spending my professional career. But point being, I so badly wanted to help people, but I was so lost. I was lost and I had no idea. It's like I think about like those videos or like pictures of like the nuclear power plant. I think of like the Homer Simpson one, like in the intro which almost everyone's seen, like this intro music thingy, whatever, trailer. I don't know what to call it. Just the intro, right? Why am I making it weird? It's the intro of the show. And Homer Simpson comes in. There's like a array of all these buttons in front of him. Like, that's honestly what I have felt like running a business is like. You are surrounded by buttons to push and levers to pull, and you don't have a clue which one is actually going to make a difference in your business. And the worst thing is you have a slew of very hungry salespeople who will try to the best of their ability to convince you that the button they know about is the button you should push, because they want your money. They want you to buy from them. So in my case, it was like, Facebook ads, that is how you really grow the business. Now, in hindsight, I didn't fully know what I was selling. I didn't fully know how to talk about my business. And again, I didn't know what I was doing. So spending money on Facebook ads was a massive money pit for me. But I had a salesperson who was like, Facebook ads can be really great for people. And it's honestly not really anything against Facebook advertising. It's just, it wasn't the right answer for me. But I didn't know what the right answer was, right? So I so badly wish I could have gone back in time and for someone to say, hey, Blake, here's what you got to do. And I had some conversations with seasoned business owners. I had this retired exec from JB Hunt who I sat down with, and I was pretty much like, man, you got to give me some advice. And honestly, his advice was like, hey, you're doing all the right things. Like, keep going. Which I was like, but it doesn't feel like I'm doing the right things. Like, I have no money. What's going on here? Now, funny enough, his advice is really what I'm talking about today, the power of consistency, and how consistency lends itself to deeper relationships. It lends itself to trustworthiness. It lends itself to establishing your brand that people see value in, where they come to you wanting to buy rather than you desperately asking someone else to buy. But so when I started the growth group, I remember thinking, geez, this is important to me, because if I can help just one person, it is worth it. And it's kind of like that younger naivete, whatever the word is, where you don't have any concept of like your time and the value of your time or what have you. And so, but that was my philosophy, was if I can help one person, it's worth it. So I remember I did the growth group. It first was like a once a month meetup, and we would get like 10 to 15 people. I can't remember how many would come, but again, it was just once a month. So I had a whole month to build up the marketing for this, and we'd have a pretty good turnout. All that to say, COVID happened. We couldn't do the group anymore. Started doing the group online. I think we'd have maybe 6 or 7 people who'd come to it. And then we went back in person, and it felt like all the momentum was gone. Like I said, a lot of weeks of just me by myself, a lot of weeks with just one person, sometimes two. And I just told myself, I can't remember if I told this to my wife or I told it to myself, because my wife would always ask, like, hey, how did the group go today? And so I might be like, oh, it was good. I had a great conversation with myself, or, what have you. But I told myself, this is something I'm going to commit myself to doing, whether there's one person or 10 people. I am going to do this because it's worth it to me. If only one person comes, it's not about the numbers. It's worth it to me if only one person comes and I can help someone in some small way. So when people come to the growth group and it's basically standing room only, or we're sliding in chairs from the outdoors, people can admire that, but then miss the part of the story of when no one was coming. I had a guy on the podcast years ago who he said this thing that always stuck with me. He talked about Jeff Bezos, and this is way before Elon Musk was even really in the conversation in terms of like the level of brand he has today. So back then, Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates, these are kind of the people that people talked about. People still talk about Jeff Bezos today, obviously. But anyway, he was talking about Jeff Bezos, and he was like, man, everyone in the business world, they want to become Jeff Bezos. They want to be Jeff Bezos. But you know what I've learned? Everyone wants to be that guy, but no one wants to be the guy working out of his garage, which is how the story goes about Jeff Bezos, that it was like a garage, startup, which that's kind of like a meme in today's culture, is like starting out of the garage. Now, knowing more about this, I don't know how true that is of Jeff Bezos. It's kind of like the joke about I got a small loan of $1 million from my dad. It's like, oh, okay. So I don't know how true his humble beginnings are, but there are many businesses that is how they start. So many people want the end result, but a lot of people aren't willing to bear the weight of the starting point, of beginning the race, of investing in consistency. I have a pretty small following on social media. It's a pretty humble following. I'll post something on LinkedIn. I'll get a handful of responses on it. And it's nice. I ran into a guy the other day who, actually I've gotten a couple of these comments over the last month. I was talking to a guy on an email chain, and then I ran into a guy the other day, and both of them said, hey, you got a nice little thing going on LinkedIn. And I kind of smiled and thought to myself, yeah. And there were a lot of posts where no one ever, I don't know who read it. I don't know what happened with it. Right. But again, consistency is a competitive advantage. Consistency is the key to success. Steve Lay, who runs Equity Business Solutions, he's been mentioned. He's a great advertiser on the podcast, an amazing business owner. And just in general, if you're in Northwest Arkansas, he is someone worth meeting. You'll want to talk to this person. Steve has done really well through the networking world. And one of the things he's talked about is we have a Wednesday morning networking event here in Northwest Arkansas. And he talks about going to that every single week for a year. There's another guy who comes to the growth group on Tuesday mornings who's done really well for himself too. And I remember his first time coming to the growth group. It was February of 2022, I think. No customers, no revenue, hadn't made a sale yet. And he was desperate. But he committed himself to coming to not just that group, but other networking events, to the point where, this guy brought in something like, I think $200,000, $300,000 of sales. And it's the power of consistency. That is the secret sauce to success. And if you are desperate for an answer, I wish I could tell you there's a silver bullet. I wish I could tell you that if you just do this one thing, and maybe if I was a better salesperson, because that's what I always hear is like, oh, just do this one thing. And not to say there isn't low hanging fruit in your business. not to say there aren't simple things you can do that can drastically improve your business. There are, absolutely. It's part of the reason why having a way to connect and collaborate and have conversations with other business owners can be so valuable to you, because you start to glean insight on, I never thought of it that way. I've never considered doing that. And, oh, okay, that's really interesting. Gaining insight from other people, there's a real edge to that. But more often than not, what people really want is a short path from A to B. And they believe that business success is found in that short path. And I got news for you. There is no short path from A to B. And the path, by the way, doesn't end at B. The path goes from like Z to like double A to like QR. I'm thinking like the Excel spreadsheet of all the columns, that just stretches on for eternity, which sometimes business ownership does feel like an eternity. It's understanding how winding and wild the road of success is, but how key to it is consistency. That was a weird sentence. How consistency is a key to it. Consistency matters in the quality of your services, in showing up every day. I had a customer once who said something to me, and it always stuck with me. We were talking about her business and a lot of the stressors that were happening in her business. And she said, Blake, I just have to show up every day. And in her case, she's a Christian. She said, I have to show up every day and God's going to do the rest. I just have to show up. I just have to show up every day serving my customers and God's going to do the rest. Whether you're spiritual or not, I think that's true. If you just show up every day thinking about your customers, who you're going to serve today, how you're going to love people well today, serving your customers, being intentional, being genuine, you are going to win long term. It's not winning at expense of someone else. It's the road we're all on, and we're wanting to take steps forward to whatever end result we're hoping for. Getting to that point faster means developing the habits we need in order to make that happen. So here's my advice to you. I wish I could tell you, like, I will, by the way, say there's a great book called Atomic Habits. That's all about habits that you can check out. But I wish I could tell you, like, okay, now here's the 3 things you do to like create consistency. And unfortunately, I don't have that. My process for consistency is honestly grounded in stubbornness. It is, I will do this thing until someone forces me not to. I will do the Tuesday morning group until there is an extreme, compelling reason not to do it. It's the line in the sand. I'm going to do this. The same thing's true about podcasting. I am going to publish this podcast until something drastic happens that keeps me from doing it. And the same thing's true about social media. For me, I'm going to be posting on social media until I have a reason not to do it. And when it comes to stubbornness, I just said, this is what I'm going to do. And honestly, I'm probably over, understand the humanity here of myself, in that I think I'm over, emphasizing like, oh, I said I was going to do it, so I just did it. There is like a habit forming side of this. There were times with the podcast where I posted and then I didn't post for 3 weeks, and then I posted again and then I didn't post for 2 more weeks. There were times with the growth group that early on where I was like, I'm just not going to do it today. I'm not going to do it this week. Sometimes where I was feeling really low about my business, and I was like, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can do it. I can't face going to the table with no one being there. Until it came to a point where I said, I will do this no matter what. And I wish I was smarter in retrospect to be able to help you understand how do you go from that wishy-washiness to that line in the sand. And I'm reminded of a quote from Tony Robbins, who basically said, you won't change until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And in all of those situations, I got to a point where it was basically like, I can't ignore this anymore. I think in terms of the growth group, it was like, I can't escape this feeling of not doing meaningful work, even if it has to be free. So I will create this group and manage it, even if one person comes. Same thing was true for the podcast. I'd get like a positive affirmation. Hey, listen to the podcast. It was really great. Okay, I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to do this. This is helping people. This is making a difference. So I'm willing to embrace the change, the pain of change, of fixing my schedule, of making it happen. Sometimes it has been very painful. Times where I've recorded where I've been like, I don't want to do this right now. Or times where it's very inconvenient for my family at home. You know, Blake's recording again. Everyone be quiet. Shush. There's been real change, you know, and there's been real pain associated with that. But I got to the point where it was too painful not to do it. So I did it. Now it's going to be really awkward if like a year from now, it's like, oh, Blake doesn't do the podcast anymore, right? Hopefully I still am. I mean, I say hopefully, I know I will be. I know I'm committed for life at this point. So I don't know if that's compelling advice or not, but my advice to you is if you're wanting to create these habits, if you're wanting to do these things, recognize that it takes drawing the line in the sand. And then beyond that, understand your fallacy, your capacity for failure as a human, in that you will not suddenly do, it's like the New Year's resolutions where someone has like 15 things that they're going to change for the next year. And you're kind of like, really? You're going to, all 15 of those things, huh? Start small. This is one thing I'm going, because this actually is the insight. Now that I think about it, choose one thing and make that a habit for you. Make that something you can do consistently. And then over time, what you will find is that thing becomes so normal to you and so part of your day and so part of your routine that you no longer really think about it. You're not exerting energy on developing it or creating it or managing it. It's just natural momentum. It's natural energy. And then what you do then is once it gets to that point, you take the spare energy that you were using in nurturing this, that's now freed up because it's become part of you. You take that spare energy and you add something else. The podcast, we publish 2 or 3 times a week. I honestly barely think about it anymore. It's so just, this is what I'm doing. The growth group, I don't even think about it anymore. I literally don't even think about it. It's like, yep, Tuesday morning, let's go. Social media content, I told myself, I think about 6 months ago, I'm going to post every day, which was grueling. Grueling. I barely think of it today. I think of it in terms of like, okay, what do I want to post? But like in terms of process, I barely even think about it anymore. And so as these things become habit, what is the next thing? The answer to that, I have no idea. But that's how it works. You do these things consistently. You start to do them better. You develop a process for them. They take less energy, less time, less stress, and that allows you to do more things. But when you think about success for your life, whether that's your business, that's your career, what have you, you have to embrace consistency. Hey, that's today's episode today. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I hope it's encouraging for you. If you have any stories about how you've embraced consistency and what it's done for your business, I'd love to hear about it. Shoot me an email, blake@goodadvicecoaching.com. And I'd love to even mention it on the show. Or, if you don't want me to, at least just send me the email and I'll give you a shout out via email, I guess. Other than that, don't forget, you can always advertise on the podcast, blake@goodadvicecoaching.com. You can check our Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice. You can drop us a review on our Google profile. That's Good Advice here in Northwest Arkansas. And beyond all of those things, thank you, those of you who've been listening long-term, who've told people about the podcast, who've supported the podcast, and who've encouraged me to continue doing the podcast. That's one thing I haven't mentioned is a lot of times the key to success are the people around you who breathe energy and life into your ideas. Thank you to those of you who have been so encouraging on the podcast and told me to keep pressing record. I appreciate you. Like I said, that's today's good advice. We'll catch you later. See ya.